All right, happy Tuesday. Thank you all for hanging out with me a little bit during your lunch hour, and appreciate you spending some time with me. So, a couple of things real quick. If you have any questions, anything specifically that you would very much like for me to make sure that I cover, just use the chat or the Q&A section. Either way, I've got both open on my computer, so I can take a look at any questions you may have. So anything I go over. This is a very, very informal type webinar. So I want to make sure I'm hitting all the topics that you all would like for me to cover. So anything that you want to make sure I go over, any questions you have, you're probably not the only one that has the question. So please feel free to put it in the Q&A section or the webinar chat area. Either one, I've got them open. Okay, so thank you very much for being here. Now, just because you're here, and you're showing up, when you are ready to buy a home, we are giving you a $250 lender credit that you can use toward closing costs when you buy a home and you use my team. Okay, so um, tomorrow, at some point tomorrow, you should be getting an email just acknowledging that you were here in the class, and when the time comes and you get a house under contract in the future, make sure you send that email back to me, and it will be just a reminder on my part that you are going to get a $250 award for being in this class. Okay, so we will make sure you get that email tomorrow. So we will go ahead and get started. And again, please feel free to use the chat, the Q&A section, because I want to make sure you're getting what you want. All right. So why buy a home? I think some of you, I see some of the names that are here. Some of you have never owned a home before. Some of you have definitely owned a home before and about ready to sell a home and buy again. So you may already know some of this if you currently own a home. But why buy a home? Number one, there's many reasons, but the first one we'll talk about just briefly are some tax savings. This isn't as attractive as it used to be, because a lot of times the standard deductions on your tax return may be more than generous to cover any itemized deductions. It used to be a much bigger deal. However, there are still tax savings that you might see whenever you become a homeowner. So being able to save some money on taxes, always a positive thing, right? The other reason that you should buy a home is the stability and roots that you start laying down when you become a homeowner. Um, people who own rather than rent stay in their homes longer. That's just kind of a proven fact that they stay around. My wife and I have been in our current home, I think 23 years now. And, we have gone through a lot in life in the last 23 years just because a lot of life happens. We've been sick, we've had things happen with kids. We've had all sorts of different things happen, and when you have stability and roots in your neighborhood, it's nice to be in a community that is there to kind of be an outer layer of your family and support you going through things. So those are cool things that you do experience when you become a homeowner, is getting to do life with that community that is around you. And I think it's super important. Number three reason why you want to buy a home definitely is appreciation. I'm going to spend some more time really diving into this deeper in just a few minutes, so we'll move on. Happiness, the feeling of owning your own home is really unmatched. You can fix it up, make it your own. You don't have to ask for someone's permission to do some sort of landscaping or to paint a room. It's all you, and you can make it into exactly who you are and fit your personality. And when you've been there for a long time, like I said, my wife and I've been in our home for 23 years. We could afford a larger place. We can move on, but it's cool to be in a house that it almost kind of identifies with your family. Like, I think our kids now, when they come back home, and one of my kids is buying now a much larger house than what we have. But when he comes home, this is home. And I like having that feeling, not just for me, but for my wife and my kids as well. And then, for whatever it's worth, this is an odd statistic, but it is an accurate one. And that is, research shows children of homeowners earn higher test scores and graduate at a higher percentage rate than those who just rent. I don't know why that is. It's a weird fact, but It's one, so I decided to add it to our little screen here. Okay, so um, next, home ownership to wealth. How much of a home should you own? Now, I think this is a really, really interesting little concept here. A lot of times when we're pre-approving someone, we'll definitely ask the question because we like to know, like, what is your monthly budget? Sometimes when we ask that question, the answer we get sometimes is far less than what someone can really get approved for. So, like, we definitely want to be conscientious of how much your budget needs to be and how much you want it to be. However, here's the thing that I don't think a lot of people understand. And the next screen I will show you in just a minute or two is going to be the return on investment you can find when you own real estate. So here's my belief, may not match Dave Ramsey's, but it's my belief. And all that being said, technically, I'm a fan of Dave Ramsey. So I like his perspective on debt and not getting into a lot of debt. But when it comes to buying real estate, here's the thing, real estate earns appreciation in this area of about 5% a year. Now, if if I gave you money, let's just say I'm your rich uncle and I wanted to give you $200,000 to invest. Let's say I gave one of you $200,000 to invest, and maybe I gave someone else in this webinar $200,000 to invest. All right. No, let me take that back. Let me say I gave someone else in this webinar $400,000 to invest. So one of you has two, the other one has four, and let's say over time the interest on your investment is earning 5%. Who is going to win over time on the interest? The person that's got the 400,000. So 5% just in 12 months, 5% interest on 400,000 is $20,000. 5% on 200,000 is only 10. So my point in this and going over some of this basic math with you is to help you understand if you can buy a $400,000 home, you're going to earn more interest over time. You're going to build and create wealth faster than if you buy a lesser expensive home. And I hope that makes sense. But I think it's good to have in mind what your monthly budget is. But if a loan officer comes back and says, "Hey, I know you'd like for your payment to be at 1,500. However, my underwriter says you can go up to 2,500." Here's the reason why I would strongly consider going up in payment is because having that more expensive home over time is going to earn you more interest. It's going to give you more appreciation. It's going to make you wealthier quicker. Okay. So I think it's super important to know that piece. I'm a visual person, so I like to see all this broken down. So I'm gonna give you an example of it. Like, let's just say, for example, you bought a $300,000 home and you wanted to do a 10% down payment. So let's say you made an investment or a down payment of $30,000. In 1 year, 12 months down the road, that $300,000 home is probably going to be worth now around 315, probably higher, but let's just be conservative and say 315 in 12 months. You did a $30,000 investment. Over 1 year, you got a 5% return or 5% interest or appreciation on it. That's a 50% return on investment. Okay, if you keep that home for 2 years, now you're getting over 100% return on investment. Like, there is nothing outside of real estate that gives you this sort of return that real estate does. And I like spending some time on this because I really want to just challenge and stretch your thinking a little bit on how buying a more expensive home, if you can afford it, does help you create wealth down the road. So I know, you may not see it in the form of someone showing up at your door in 12 months with a briefcase full of cash of the appreciation, but you will see it at some point in your life, either when you go to sell the home in the future, or if you want to refinance it in the future and pull some of that equity back out, it's all there. Another very, very interesting statistic I read recently is that people that retire rely 70% on the equity of their real estate versus their 401k or retirement plan. People that retire realize 70% of the equity they have in real estate versus their 401k or retirement plan. So I hang out here and camp out here for a lot during this webinar because I just want to urge the importance of number one, owning real estate because it will change your financial life. And if you have kids, their life forever and ever and ever when you become a homeowner. Then secondly, I'd just like to challenge the thinking that yes, my monthly budget is this, but you're telling me I can go up to this. This is why you might want to go up. You will build wealth faster. And I hope that makes a lot of sense. Okay. So the other interesting thing, and I'm going to get into interest rates next and kind of what's going on in the market with rates because that's kind of the elephant in the room. But everything that I've just talked about so far, what is the one thing that I have not brought up to this point as it's concerned to creating wealth and buying real estate? The one thing I've not talked about is interest rate because it really, as it reflects to the return on investment you're getting from owning real estate, the current interest rate has almost little to zero impact on that return on investment strategy, like none. It doesn't matter if the rate's 2% or 8%. It really doesn't matter. That return on investment is still there. So, so many people get caught up in, aren't rates higher right now? Technically, yes, they're a little bit higher than what we saw over the last, probably 3 or 4 years ago, for sure. But if you want to look at it in true perspective, I've been doing mortgage loans now for 28 years. I actually went back a few weeks ago to see what the average rate is over my 28-year career. The average rate, 7.375. Guess where rates are at right now? About 7.375. Like, this is honestly the average. This is the norm. We just got really, really, really spoiled over the last several years when we were seeing rates in the 2s and 3s and 4s. I don't know. I'm 56. I don't know that we're going to see rates under 3 ever again while I'm still here on this planet. Maybe we do. I don't think we will. I do think rates will come down at some point in the future, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute too. Okay, so let's talk about where rates are at and what drives rates. Rates are driven by something called mortgage-backed securities. So it's funny, a lot of times, what you may hear in the media or what you may hear in the news are things about the prime rate. Or you may hear the Fed has decided, like this has been in the news the last day or two, it looks like the Fed may not cut rates anymore this year. So when they say that, that is the federal prime rate. That's not the same thing as mortgage rates. In fact, what's interesting is a lot of times when the Fed raises that prime rate, many times when they raise that prime rate, actually long-term mortgage rates may come down. Sometimes it has the reverse effect. If they bring that Fed prime rate down, a lot of times we might see mortgage rates climb a little bit. So sometimes it does not always work in tandem when you hear that the Fed is making a change. All right, so this is mortgage rates, and this is literally covering about the last 8 weeks. And I know it's a funny looking chart with a bunch of red and green. It kind of looks like a Christmas light show that I've got for you. But what it is anytime that you see mortgage-backed securities down, and when they're down, that's indicated by the red that you see. All right, so if you see red on the screen, it means mortgage-backed securities are down. When they come down, interest rates are going to go up. When mortgage-backed securities are up, and that's the green, anytime that is up, mortgage rates are typically getting better. You will see over the last 8 weeks, for the most part, there's way more red. And then there's some days, like you see some days back around April 10th, really, really bad day for rates. Okay, there's a lot of volatility. So like when you get pre-approved, you're not locked into a rate. We're pre-approving you based usually on where the rates are at currently. So you can't really get locked into a rate until you have a contract on a home to purchase. But once you know what the property address is, what the purchase price is, and when your closing date is, at that point we can lock the rate in and stop any bleeding from happening or from the rates going up. So at that point, you can get locked in. Up until that point, rates are just very volatile. So we always encourage our clients that we have pre-approved is when you find a home that you think this has the potential to be the home that I might buy, let our team know what that address is, what the price is. We'll pull up the property taxes and we'll pull up the current rate. So that way you're not walking into an offer blindfolded about what your payment may be, about what your closing costs may be, or any of that information. We'll make sure we get everything up to date so that if that offer goes through, you're going to have a really good idea. This is my rate, this is my payment, this is how much money I need the day of closing. I don't want any confusion on any of that, and I want you to feel safe in being able to make an offer. Okay, so we'll make sure that you have all of that information, but it's just super important to always call me and kind of get an idea of where the rates are at if you have questions. Don't trust too much mortgage calculators online. Don't trust a lot of things you find online because sometimes they're out of date. Okay, so always feel free to call my team, give me a call, and just let me know, and we will help you with that piece when the time comes. All right, so just so many rates. Um, so much volatility in rates. They're all over the place. Always feel like you can call. Here's the other thing I tell people too is um, don't get so bent just on what the rate is or feeling like you're going to get stuck with that rate for a long time. If you're buying a home right now, the odds of it being a long time loan that you have, very low. Like my wife and I mentioned before, we've owned our home for 23 years. So we did the purchase loan and I refinanced it twice in that period. That's what's normal. Most people are going to refinance. So if you buy a home right now, and even if I'm telling you like what you qualify for is $1,000 more a month than where you want to be, I'd still encourage you go all out, buy as much home as you can because it's going to help you build wealth faster, knowing that in a probably short period of time, you're going to be able to refinance. Now, what's a short period of time? It's hard to say, but I will tell you this in doing this for 28 years, rates tend to get better when we get closer to the presidential election. It may or may not happen. I'm not going to guarantee or bet on any of it because there's just so much volatility. But my personal opinion is rates will probably be better in the next 12 to 18 months. I do believe that. So if you're buying a home right now, just think on it. I'm not going to have this loan a long time. When rates drop, I will refinance and improve that rate. Okay. So that's what most people will do. All right. Now I'm going to just remind you the chat room is open. Q&A room is open. It should be open anyhow. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to put some up in that and just let me know. All right. So what is the process of buying a home? What does that look like right now? Some of you have already done some of these pieces. Some of you have already been pre-approved and been hunting for homes, and a couple of you have even made an offer. It just hasn't worked out quite yet. But the whole process is this. Number one, you always want to start by getting pre-approved first. You really don't ever want to start by going out and looking at homes with a realtor and getting your heart set on something and then be told you can't buy that home. Always start with a lender first. And if you've not done a pre-approval yet, we would be honored to help you do this piece. It's a super easy process to get done. We can start with a telephone call. We can start coming in the office. We can do Zoom. You can start on our website. Whatever makes it easy for you. We are happy to accommodate you to help you get pre-approved. Once you're pre-approved, once you know the type of loan that you can do and how much you can go up to, that's when you get back with your realtor and you start going house hunting, right? So a lot of talk in the news lately too about, you know, the National Association of Realtors and the lawsuit they just had regarding buyers paying commission. Right now, there's not been a whole lot of change on that. I would just touch on this and say buyer agents, real estate agents are worth every penny that they work for. They do so much in helping you negotiate. So right now, there's not going to be any changes between now and mid-July sometime. So if you're hot and heavy and buying, now's the time to do it. Okay. There's probably going to be some shifts and changes in realtors commissions and how they're paid later around July. Now is a great time though to still buy while there's no changes for that. But get pre-approved, do house hunting. When you find the right house, as I mentioned earlier, let us update you on the rate, pull the exact property taxes, and make sure you're really good on the payment. And then once you are, you make an offer. When you're ready to make an offer, we're going to update your pre-approval letter so it's specific to the property address and the offer price. So everything matches the offer that you're making to the seller. The other thing that we're going to do too in this piece is I'm going to pick the telephone up and call the listing agent. One of the benefits of doing this for 28 years is I know probably 90 to 95% of the realtors in this area, meaning that they know me too and they trust us. We have a great reputation. They know if I call them and say, hey, I'm working with so and so client, they're looking at your listing on 123 Main Street and they're a slam dunk. It's going to be a great loan. It's going to be an easy process. They know if I tell them that, they can take it to the bank. That helps your offer get approved a whole lot of times versus other people that are just providing a generic pre-approval from an online lender. Okay. So you'll make an offer. I'm also going to let you know kind of what your out-of-pocket expenses are on this home, if there are any. The typical out-of-pocket expenses outside of, going to closing with money possibly, and sometimes you don't have to do that, but the typical out-of-pocket expenses are you paying for a home inspection. And depending on the size of the home, that amount can vary a little bit. All right, so that's usually an out-of-pocket expense, but you have a home inspection. Most lenders also charge for an appraisal to be done. Now, I'm going to back up. Home inspection, it doesn't matter to me whether you get one or not. I think they're smart to get, but as a lender, we don't require a home inspection. As a buyer, if I'm buying a home, I probably want one, okay? Because I want to know what I'm buying and what I'm getting into. The appraisal piece, we typically are going to require 9 times out of 10. There's a few instances where it's not needed, but I would anticipate needing an appraisal. An appraisal is different than a home inspection, whereas the appraisal's main concern is making sure the house is worth what you're paying for it. So we will order that. Some lenders charge that up front during the process. We collect it at closing. So we're not going to get paid from you on that immediately. We will wait until you get closed, and then it's just part of your normal closing cost. We'll also order title work. What this does is make sure there's no liens. So the last thing we want is for you as the buyer to buy a home and there's potential liens that come up in the future. So we want to make sure the house is free and clear of all encumbrances. And then you go to closing. Closing, it sounds like a negative word. That's the day that's really celebrating because that's the day that you're getting your keys to to your new home, right? But in our world, it's called a closing. So that's the day that you typically go to closing. All right. One question that we've had pop up in the Q&A, can you refinance at any time or do you need to own your home for a certain amount of time first? That's a great question. You can refinance literally at any point. So if the rates drop 2% the first month, you can refinance. There's no prepayment penalty at all. You can do it at any point. Okay. All right, so how to make your offer stand out. Here's a few things I'm just going to share with you because we are still in a very competitive market. Some of you that have already been making some bids on homes, you already know this to be true. We're in a very competitive market, so how can you make your offer stand out? Number one, make sure your realtors are working in tandem with us. The listing agent who represents the seller doesn't just look at the number that you're offering on that home. They're not just looking at what you're willing to pay for it. They're looking to see who the lender is. And if it's in lender that's local, that means a lot. And if it's a lender that's local with a good reputation, that means even more. So they are looking at all of that. They look at the security of that, not just for their seller that's selling the home, because they want to make sure this works out for the seller. But if you also think about this, that realtor is also relying on this to get paid. So they want to make sure their seller's taken care of. They also want to make sure they're getting their paycheck because they've earned it, right? So the quality of your lender and realtor's communication, it signals a secure offer that will close on time. Little communication equals low security. So they like a warm and fuzzy feeling. So I'm just saying, working with a realtor that's working in tandem with us will help you. Secondly, offer a higher earnest money deposit. So sometimes I find folks don't know, but a lot of times when you're making an offer on a home, so a lot of times, probably 99% of the time, the realtor is going to ask you to provide an earnest money deposit. This just kind of shows good faith that you're going to follow through on the purchase of the home. So if there's no fault of the seller, but you just decide to get cold feet and you've taken their home off the market for 2 weeks, they could keep your earnest money deposit. Okay, that rarely ever happens. What typically happens is that deposit that you give to the realtor, it's being credited back to you at closing. So it helps cover your down payment or your closing cost or whatever money you need at closing, it helps cover that. But offering a higher earnest money deposit helps separates your offer. So I will tell you in our market, it's normal for there to be a earnest money deposit of $1,000. But if you've got the means to do a $5,000 deposit or a 10,000, you're not going to lose the money. It's going to come back to you to help pay for down payment or closing costs. Offer more. It just shows the seller you're super committed to following through. Okay. If you've got the means to do it, some other ways to get your offer to stand out, and that is don't put an appraisal contingency. Now, if you don't have a lot of money to use for down payment, this is probably not an option. But if you have a lot of money for down payment, putting an option in where the sale of the home is not contingent on the home appraising for the sales price, that could be a very appealing thing to a seller. Okay. The other thing is less closing costs for the seller. So it is normal in our market sometimes for buyers to get some of their closing costs paid for by the seller. You could also think about reversing that. And again, I'm giving you some ideas to help your offer stand out. You may not want to do this, but it's just an idea that we're seeing being done some, and that is offer to pay the seller's closing cost. Anytime a seller is selling a home, they too have some closing cost. It's not very expensive. It might be 1,000 to 2,000 at most. So we are seeing some contracts come through where the buyer is offering to take care of the seller's closing costs. It helps that offer to stand out. Okay, so anyhow, those are just some different ideas that you can do to get that offer to stand out. And as I mentioned before, one of the things we do is we're going to make your offer specific or your pre-approval letter specific to your offer because we want to give you the best odds. And we're going to call the listing agent to make sure they know that you're well qualified. So those are some things you can do. All right. That really brings us to the end. We've got like a minute left. Any other parting questions before you sign off? And if you don't have any, thank you very much for joining me. But if you do have some, I can stay on here for as long as you might need. Okay. So I will keep an eye out for the Q&A section or the chat room until I see everybody has left. Okay. But I hope you have an amazing rest of the day if you're done here. And thank you again for being here.